Hello again! So last week I talked about Shakespeare's play Othello, and I had seen a production of it, or was going to see it, the evening after I made this vlog. And in celebration of seeing it performed, I thought I would spend another week talking a little bit more about the play. Now, in reflection on what I talked about last week, I feel like I talked a lot about the men in the play and a lot about some of the things going on with them, but I didn't really talk about the women. And that's unfortunate because without the women there would be absolutely no play. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the three main women in the play and talk about their characters. So the main female characters in this play are Desdemona, Othello's wife, Emilia, Iago's wife, and the character of Bianca, who's a courtesan and is in love with the character of Cassio, and he kind of goes back and forth and showing affection for her. Sometimes he really deeply cares about her, and other times he doesn't. And despite the fact that she doesn't have very many lines, Bianca ends up being a very pivotal character and the one who causes a lot of unfortunate circumstances later on. What happens with Bianca is she ends up with this handkerchief that belongs to Desdemona that Othello had given her. It was dropped by Desdemona, and Emilia picks it up knowing that her husband has an interest in having it, and so she gives it to her husband Iago, who of course uses it for nefarious means because he's Iago and his character exists to cause chaos. And he ends up planting this handkerchief in Cassio's chambers. Cassio, who doesn't appear to be the brightest bulb in the court, decides that he's going to keep this handkerchief, despite the fact that he has no idea where it came from, and gives it to Bianca. And Bianca has it and is concerned about how Cassio got it because she doesn't actually know, he doesn't know. So when Othello finds out that his wife doesn't actually have the handkerchief, and it's in the hands of courtesan, a lot of hatred is expressed against poor Bianca, the courtesan, because of her reputation and because of her job. And that's a very interesting part of this play, really, is how much sort of slut-shaming occurs towards a woman who is known for, her job is to sleep with men for money. And it comes back later with calling Desdemona a whore and this whole scene exposing her as this terrible woman because of these rumors that are put against her. None of them are true, but it all focuses on this handkerchief, which is passed around the three women. Emilia doesn't get as much terrible sexist language against her, but there is still a scene where Iago kind of mocks her, and this scene could be played either as, him just teasing her and talking about her sharp tongue, or it could really be portrayed much more in a way that makes her seem sort of like a shrew, or in a way that he does not respect her at all. And the version I saw performed at the Guthrie, it was kind of performed more just mocking her and teasing her, but it was an interesting relationship, especially because the actress who played Emilia was African American. And so in this play, well, a lot is made of race. You have two couples who are biracial instead of just one, and I thought this was a really interesting approach to take and made Iago all the more sort of warped and more of how he's kind of just playing people. He shows affection for people and cares about people, but at the same time you get the sense that he's really just using and manipulating people, especially his own wife, who he convinces to take the handkerchief from Desdemona and use as a sort of a prop to show Desdemona's assumed unfaithfulness. I think what makes this play so intriguing and sort of frightening on a certain level is how close it is to becoming a comedy. It starts off sort of similar to Much Ado About Nothing. By the time they get to the Isle of Cyprus, they're supposed to fight this battle against a foe, but the foe is defeated by the storm, and so it's this post-military sort of celebration, which is where Much Ado About Nothing starts. Much Ado About Nothing begins after all these men come back from battle, and they go to this lord's house, and they celebrate and enjoy their successes. And they're kind of at the same level, but Othello veers off into this very, very darker storyline, whereas Much Ado About Nothing touches that storyline and jumps back and goes back to the happy comedy route instead. What's also unique about this play is that Othello isn't undone by his military exploits. He's undone in battle or any sort of political scheming. He's undone because of his own affection for Desdemona, for his love for her, and the fact that he's implanted with this seed of jealousy. And it's really different than some of the other war characters in Shakespeare's plays, usually people who are in battle, except with the exception of Much Ado About Nothing and plays like that. Usually any sort of character who's brought down by tragedy, who's a warrior, is brought down by political exploits, public exploits, things to do with war, whereas he's brought down on a very personal level, as I think I mentioned last week. And he's destroyed in a very, very personal way, and in a way that's very terrifying. In the staging I saw, it was excruciatingly painful to watch Desdemona and Othello's relationship fall apart, because they had made them such a cute couple. They clicked really well, and just the way that they kind of had their like light romantic expression on stage, that to see this really intense sweet passion fall apart is just, it's really excruciating, and something that makes this play sort of terrifying, to see that because of one person's words this entire bond is broken in a way that doesn't make sense in certain ways, but at the same time, if you see from their characters' perspectives, you kind of understand how it starts to erode and break down, because Iago is a very, very powerful liar, and it's really unsettling. It's a really unsettling play. In terms of how this play treats women, it's a very interesting one. Much like some of other Shakespeare's works, it could be portrayed in a way that women look very bad. It could be could express certain biases that way, but by the end results of the play, it's hard to perform it any other way that doesn't show women as victims to a larger societal power, as expressed very strongly by Iago, that blames women for men's wrongdoing, that makes women seem like villains, and blames them for not being chaste or pure in the certain ways that they're expressed in the play. And that's something that I think is very interesting about this play, is that it makes this really strong statement about racism, and it also makes this really strong statement about sexism. And having those two paired together is really, really unique, especially for a play written, in the Renaissance, where ideas of racism and feminism are not like they are today, but that same language can still be completely, completely important and accurate for today's situations. Another character I haven't mentioned at all, but is incredibly important to the play, is the character of Rodrigo, who is one of the first characters to be seen on stage. He's sort of a friend of Iago's. I would say friend, but using that term very loosely, because Iago does not treat him very well. Rodrigo is a former lover of sorts of Desdemona. He wanted to marry her, but was refused by her father, and is now not entirely consumed with jealousy, but more heartbroken that Desdemona is married to another. And so his heartbreak leads him to join up with Iago and join in this strategy to bring Othello down. And Rodrigo is interesting because on the staging I saw of him, he's kind of, I don't know how to describe him without using the word effeminate, because I don't want to use that word because it's used negatively by certain groups. He's shown as a sort of more like softer man. He's not hard and masculine. And it's interesting that he's chosen to be portrayed that way, as being somehow lesser than Othello and less masculine. And he does not want to fight. He doesn't want to do battles. He is very, very concerned about Iago's violent streak, and that he has to, at certain points, fight. And in fact, in the battle scene he engages in, he ends up dying. Spoilers. And he's just a very interesting character, because he shows a different sort of side to men, and a side that's sort of spurned and, in this case, easily manipulated by Iago. And even though I talked about this more in terms of gender for women, this play could also make really strong statements about gender for men, about how men are supposed to act hard and masculine, and how Othello's affection for Desdemona is seen as different, and strange that such a war hero would have a softer heart, and perhaps Iago doesn't like that, and you can make these whole long comparisons about ideas of masculinity with the characters of Othello and Rodrigo, and how their different expressions of emotion could become problematic for somebody like Iago, who perhaps doesn't care for that. Now, I could probably wax poetic about this play forever. It is one of Shakespeare's longest plays. The production I saw was 3 hours long, and that's counting an intermission, but it's still a very, very long play. But it's one of his that has a lot of layers, a lot going on, and one that's, I think, one of the most societally important and complicated to discuss. But I'll just leave it there for this week. Next week, I haven't chosen a topic yet, but if you have any suggestions as the viewing audience, I would love to hear them. Any comments, questions, anything you want me to talk about, please put them in the comments box. I would love to hear from you guys. But that's all for this week, so cheers!